allows me to escape from the busyness of the city and focus. I get to see all of the chaos and all of the movement around me, but I get to go at my own pace. I started painting on x-rays because I needed a canvas that people would pay attention to rather than focusing on my artwork. That gives me time to prepare myself for when they say, so what does this mean? It's almost like a personal thing to me, what it means or why you put it together. It's almost like you don't want to share it. It's your own little secret. Somebody probably looked at this x-ray with so much anxiety that they have this deformity or this disfigurement for the rest of their life, and I take it and make it something that people will enjoy. You don't go in and show somebody an x-ray and say, look at how healthy I am. You want to see the tragedy in it. The x-rays are the only things that I can really think about that you want to see what's wrong with it. The perfect ones are the ones that get thrown away. The more broken an x-ray is, the more excited I get to paint on it. You can actually see there's a picture of that pain. I don't think that should be hidden. It's beautiful in itself. I lost my father when I was 15, and I think a lot of times people will use that as an excuse to kind of just completely go off the path that they're on. But to me, I had an incredible, amazing, encouraging father for 15 years of my life, which is more than most people can say for their living fathers. So I think there's always something broken, and you can always take it and put it into a positive, and that's the way that you rise up. You really can't experience happiness until you've experienced pain, because then you're able to compare the difference.
I love that video. And I love it because the reality is, just as we talked about, and we have been talking about, that pain often is a common denominator for all of us. We all understand and know pain, and God knows that Jesus, like we talked a lot about this, Jesus can sympathize with our weaknesses, was tempted in every way that we did not sin, so we can approach him with confidence to help us in our time of need. As a pastor that worked with addicts and abuse victims for 10, 11 years, probably one of the things that the questions that I got asked the most by people, especially people that were trying to figure out whether they wanted to follow God or not, whether they believed in God and felt conflicted, is they wanted to know, if God is so miraculous, if God can do so many things, how come he won't take my pain away? I have deep pain from tragedy in my life, whether it was a loss of someone, whether it was I was bullied and I was given names, whether it was abuse, whatever it might be. They want to know, like, I've been praying and asking God to take this pain away from me, and I still hurt. I still feel the pain. And that's a hard question sometimes, as a pastor. Sometimes people just want to put a verse on it and go, just keep trusting. God's going to, I think there's some value in that at some level. But the reality is, I think God does. God can miraculously heal. I've seen it happen. I've seen God do amazing healings in people, where even with things like cancer, where they have people pray over them and they're healed. But in my experience, that is not the common thing that happens. Often people still wrestle with their pain. I mean, I shared the story about Jacob. He jarred his hip and he walked for the rest of his days with a limp. Some of us walk with limps. We have pain, and I think that the beautiful thing about what Jesus does in our lives is he doesn't want to waste our pain. What we went through was significant, and I think in those spaces, and I can at least speak for myself, that it is actually the pain that God has used the most in my life to do some of the greatest things that I feel like the work that he's done through me and where I've got to participate with him is walking with people who have also experienced pain because I have that connection with them. It's not always the same issue. I work with a lot of, heroin addicts, meth addicts, people like that, sometimes prostitutes. I haven't experienced that, but I do know what pain feels like. We have different stories, but that common denominator of pain, and it's really helping them go, let's not let God waste your pain. Like how can we dive into that and understand what Jesus wants to do in that space? Because he doesn't want you to come with shame. He wants to take that and he wants to shift it and move it towards how we can love people well. And so I want to talk this morning a little bit about some basic steps of how to walk with kind of hurting people. When he calls us, we've been looking at this verse. I went past my verse there. I think it's at the end, so I'll go back to it. Loving God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. That we want to love this relational God who made us in his image to be relational and to really know what it means to truly love him and respond out of that love to reach to others, to love our neighbors as ourselves. And sometimes it's really hard to know how to do that well. I don't know how many of you have tried to walk with people that are really hurting. It is a very messy, confusing thing to do sometimes. But I think that we can be prepared, just like the Good Samaritan was prepared with things to help the wounded man. I think that we can do some preparation ahead of time to get ourselves in a space where we actually can help people better. And I wish that more people, especially more Christians, would actually take time to do this. I think that and we'll talk about scripture in a minute, but I think sometimes people slap a verse on pain, slap a verse on thing and say, it's gonna, just read this verse, it'll help. And I think that's sometimes taking the easy way out. I think sometimes knowing how to actually sit with someone and walk with them and sit in their pain with them is really, really important. And so this is just some basics, but I called it the HELP strategy. I was trying to think of a good acronym. I'm like, how do we help? HELPS. Well, we use HELPS. The HELP strategy is just a guide to point you toward those things that are essential when helping foster community as a Christian leader. It's not exhaustive, as there are many other elements that could and should be included, but hopefully these will start you off on the right track. And I know a lot of you are getting ready. I anchor your house. When are you guys officially done? May 17th. So I know a lot of you are thinking about what's next for me. What am I going to do in the summer? What am I going to do next year? I know you're processing some of that. And I would just hope that as you walk away, if anything, that you would say, all right, God, you've changed my life through this year. You've done some things in me. How do you want to use me? And some of you have experienced significant pain. And I would encourage you, ask God, how can you use some of this pain to actually draw me closer to you? And how can you use that to help others and to love my neighbor? And so hopefully as we walk through this, hopefully we can have an opportunity to learn a few things along the way here. First one, honesty. So the first thing that I would encourage you to bring when you come to people that are hurting in community, when people are hurting as you're walking with them, is just to be honest. It's crucial when we're walking with people and inviting them to risk in community to be honest with ourselves and with them about what we are able to offer. So you're not going to be able to help everyone. Sometimes you probably shouldn't try to help certain people because they need more acute care than you're able to provide. So we need to actually be honest with ourselves about who we are and what we're able to do. Be honest with yourself about your own issues and wounds. If you've not done your own work to heal in these areas or are still confused about hidden wounds, do the work to face these things. Often when leading group discussions or working with an individual, some of these wounds can get tapped or triggered, and it's better to prepare ahead of time than to be caught off guard when they do. So I had a guy, do I have time to tell the story? Yes. I had a guy that came into my office. I worked with him actually, we worked for a long time. His name was Alex. He was a really neat young man. He was probably, I think he was, at the time, he was 29. I can't even go into description of the pain and the hurt that he had experienced in his life. He had been sex trafficked as a teenage boy in the streets of Portland. And he got saved. He had gotten into a recovery program. He had a meth addiction and a heroin addiction, and so he had gotten into a recovery program after a relapse. And amazingly, he had some really incredible people that walked with him through that process, and he came to know Christ. And he really wanted to help people. And he really wanted to know what it looked like to be loved by Jesus. And so we spent hours talking about that. And he was really antsy ahead of time. He wanted to just jump right in with people. And it was a slow process of saying, Alex, it's going to take time for you to be ready because there's so many things that are happening in your life. And I remember him being in my office one day, and we were talking about what Christ was doing in his life and how he was coming to understand himself more, and that actually God loved him even amidst some of the things that he had done and that had been done to him. And I had to run to the restroom, and I went to the restroom, came back, and he was looking through a little book that I had with some pictures of local people in the area. And he just happened to come across a picture of one of his abusers while we were sitting there. And all of a sudden, he just started sobbing and then screaming at the top of his lungs. And he could not control himself because just seeing that abuser was just so hard for him in that moment. And he didn't know how to handle his emotions. And it brought waves back of all the pain that he had experienced in that space. And he was very terrified that this person was still out there hurting people. And that's where it's obviously his story is his. You probably may not have a story as extreme as his, but the reality is it is important to do some of your own work, that if you've got some things in your life that you haven't invited Jesus into, to help him sort through that, and shame is still holding some significant masks on for you, that I think it's really important to do some of that work, especially before you try to walk with people through that kind of pain. Because you can get yourself in a situation where you don't know what to do, and it's really scary. Thankfully, I had done a lot of the work to be in that space, and I knew how to sit with him in that. But I really loved Alex. Unfortunately, he died of an overdose a couple years later. He relapsed, and it was really hard. But I love what God did in his life, because he changed him, and he really loved Jesus. And I know that I'm going to get to sit with Alex someday, and we'll be able to be in his new body, and he will have no pain anymore. And so I ask you to just try to be honest, and don't step into things that you aren't sure you're ready to. Bring other people along with you. If you find yourself in a situation where you don't know how to walk with somebody that's hurting, there's a lot of people that you know, and you have resources. If you don't, ask somebody, but do your own work. Be honest about your own issues and your own wounds, and be willing to face some of those, because it will help you be in a place where you can walk with people better. And that's part of the reason why we've even done some of the work this week. The Zoom for me is an opportunity to just kind of help you feel some like, oh my goodness, like I am triggered in this moment of just, it's too loud in here and it's driving me crazy. Recognize those moments and those spaces for you where you're like, oh wow, like something's happening, and I want to explore that, and I want to dive into that pain rather than just avoiding it or pretending it's not there, because usually wounds don't heal themselves. I would also say with this, most people are hurt in relationships. It's usually often through relationship that we are hurt, and it's often through relationships that we heal. And so part of that process is just sitting with someone and being with them. That presence often can be really healing for people. Even if you don't have the words to say, just your presence and being a safe person can actually help somebody go, wow, like I'm having a different experience with this person than I've had with maybe anyone in my life, because they are accepting me and loving me for how I am, and they get to experience Christ's love through you to that other person. Okay, so being honest about our issues. Create healthy boundaries and be honest about your time and your availability. So boundaries are actually really important, right? We need boundaries in our lives. Absolutely need boundaries in our lives. And we need to be honest about our time and our availability. I had a guy that I was working with named Jimmy. It was when I first started recovery ministry, and I really wanted to start it off with a bang, and this guy came to our church He had just lost a friend from an overdose, and he came down to the front of the stage, and he wanted to talk to a pastor. And so our lead pastor called me over to meet Jimmy. And so I invited Jimmy to come to our refuge community, which was our recovery community. And I really, and this is, I hate this in the moment, but I wanted to change Jimmy's life. And if I'm being fully honest, I wasn't even in that moment thinking, God, I want you to change Jimmy's life. I wanted to change Jimmy's life because I wanted the church to feel like, oh, we got the right guy in the right job, right? Like it looks good for me that I helped Jimmy. And because of that, I didn't have good boundaries with Jimmy. And I wasn't honest with Jimmy about my time, about my resources. And so I would spend too much time with Jimmy. I would spend sometimes 2 to 4 hours a week with Jimmy, picking him up that he lived half an hour away and bringing him to refuge. And then every single time he didn't have money, so then I would buy him dinner. All of a sudden it was costing me a lot of money. It was costing me a lot of my time. I had just gotten married to Daisha, and we were trying to figure out what married life looked like. And at first, he was super grateful, super thankful. But because I hadn't set good expectation with him around boundaries and some of the time that I had, he started taking it for granted and thinking that that's how it always was going to be. And then it started really affecting my checkbook, my bank account. It started affecting Daisha and how our relationship was because I was spending so much time trying to get Jimmy to be my first trophy of somebody who had changed their life. And I had to have at some point a sit down with Jimmy where I had to be honest with him about the type of relationship that we had because he felt like at first I was sort of a pastor, then I became sort of a mentor, then he felt like I was a friend, and then he felt like I was his only family. And so he would call me at 1 a.m. because he couldn't sleep because he was having nightmares. And because of my personality and who I am, I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, need to be needed. I would answer the phone and Daisha would be like, what are you doing? And I'd be like, oh, it's Jimmy, I gotta go. And it would always be, and it started really weighing on me and I started burning out. And so I had to have a sit down with Jimmy and say, Jimmy, we have to have an honest conversation around our relationship and the dynamics of what kind of relationship this is. It was hard. We were able to work through it. We're still close. He's doing really, really well. He changed his life around. He's an addictions counselor now. But it took a while because he felt really hurt because I hadn't set an expectation of boundaries with him. I hadn't modeled good boundaries with him. And so therefore, he didn't learn good boundaries from me because I didn't have good boundaries. Sometimes setting up a good boundary with somebody is the best way to care for them, even though it feels hard because it feels like they're going to be hurt by you saying no. But actually you're modeling and teaching them it's okay to have boundaries in your life. So many of us have never been modeled good boundaries from people. And so when we're caring for people well and we show them good boundaries and they're like, oh, I feel so rejected. Like I wanted to go to lunch and he said he can't because he's with his family or he's got something else to do. And they can get really upset. But then the next time you see them, you're excited to see them. You're asking them questions. They're like, oh, you still love me and care for me even though you said no? It's like, of course. We need to have boundaries in our life, Jimmy. Like that's part of it. I didn't say no because I don't like you. I said no because I had something else that was going on. And eventually he learned to have good boundaries too. So when we want to care for people well, having good boundaries is important and being honest about our availability and our time. Okay? Be honest about what you are personally able to handle and make a referral or seek guidance when needed. Be aware of healthy, helpful referrals ahead of time. So I kind of talked about this already with my first example, but it's worthwhile to go, who are some of the people, maybe you're doing youth ministry and you're with the junior high and you're with the high school group and you're going, okay, I just talked to this kid today and I can't believe what he told me about what's happening at home. Do you know the right people to say, hey, I'm probably not the guy that should probably be counseling him or walking with him through this? I don't know how, like there's abuse happening and we probably need to report it, but I don't know how to do that. If you want to walk with people well, just be aware of the kind of people that you can bring along to support you. There's some great people in this community who know how to walk with people well, who know how to walk with really hurting people, and it's great to bring them alongside. You can learn from them in the process, but it actually is the best way to love the person that you're actually trying to care for. So know counselors, know those people, know the pastors who really know how to come alongside somebody that's really hurting. I spent a lot of time with Dane yesterday, and that guy, he's got a crazy story. Like he knows, he will never feel or make somebody feel shamed because Dane knows probably what most people have been through. He's been in a lot of places in his life. It's like, hey, I want to introduce you to this pastor at my church. His name's Dane. He's a big wave surfer. He's a great guy, and he might be able to relate to your story. Can I connect you guys? And let's him step into that space and then ask him, like, how did you do that well? I want to learn from you. Really encourage you to try to do that. So let's be honest. Honesty is huge. Engage thoughtfully. When we walk with people in community, it's important that we pay attention to how we're going to be present with them in their situation. So when I say engage, when we meet with someone, just be thoughtful about how I want to pay attention to this person. I want to listen to them well. I want to know and ask good questions to really draw out of them, what is God doing in their life? Can I see something? Is the Spirit saying something to me about this person that actually maybe this is a direction of a conversation we could have that's going to open them up to what God may want to do in their life? So engaging thoughtfully. Create an environment that feels safe. People tend to do their best learning and take the most risks relationally when they feel safe. And I will say, and a little bit uncomfortable, I'll talk about that in a second, but feel safe. And the best way that we create safety for people is by creating clear expectations. So let me walk you through this. When I would do groups, when we would work with all sorts of different people, one of the main things, the most important, probably crucial things that we did is we would, as a community, as a group that was working together, we would come up with group rules. What are some expectations that we can think about when we come together? You know, let's all agree that we're not going to bring somebody just new to the group, that we are going to have a closed group, so that when I've been preparing to share something about my story that's really hard, that all of a sudden there's not some new person there that I don't know, and now I'm like scared to share because I have no idea if that person's going to go and tell somebody else. Like, expectation of like what we say here stays here. Like, that we can trust that if I share something with you and it's important, that you're not going to just go and tell a bunch of other people, because like my story is important to me and it's painful and I don't want just necessarily anyone to know about it. You know, whatever it might be, expectations are really, really important. And it allows people to feel more safe so that they can start being in a space where they can put away some of their boundaries, some of those things that would be defense mechanisms. They can put their walls down and say, I'm going to try to let God work in my life. I'm going to try to be open. And Jesus, I'm going to try to trust that you brought these people in my life, so I'm going to let some of the healing happen. And so it's really important to establish sort of that safety and those clear expectations. The reason I say people do their best work when they feel safe and a little bit uncomfortable is that we all need to be challenged a little bit, right? I talked about this with someone this morning. If it's almost as if, you know, we're in a little box. So say I have this little box of my life that I live in because of certain things. Maybe I don't feel like my life is free as other people. And sometimes when we're in that space and you'll work with people that feel this way, they just feel kind of like they don't really feel like they have a lot of freedom. And you may look at other people in the world and go, man, it just feels like they're not held back by so many things that I feel like I'm held back by. That they're free, they feel fun, they feel like they're having a good time, whatever it might be, and I don't feel like I'm that way. Well, part of the way that we heal and change is by actually stepping a little bit outside the box, even though it's super uncomfortable, and just standing there and going, oh God, please help me to be in the space. I might have to jump back sometimes, but soon, eventually, if we can be a little bit uncomfortable, it allows our side of the box of our life to get a little bit bigger, to where it doesn't hurt quite so much. It doesn't feel quite so uncomfortable. I don't feel quite so anxious here. And then all of a sudden, you forget that that's like you're outside of the box that you used to be, and all of a sudden your box is bigger. And then it's like, oh, all right, I'm going to challenge myself a little bit more to press in, to be vulnerable, to try to be in relationship with someone. Sometimes this is honestly growing in our relationship with Jesus. Is sometimes I'm going to try to talk to you about this one thing in my life that I don't feel like I've been able to talk to you about, but I want to try to have a conversation with you about this. I'm going to try to sit there. I'm going to try to have this conversation. It may feel uncomfortable. Eventually, it becomes normal, and we feel like, oh, and all of a sudden, life feels so much bigger. And we've healed, and we've done a lot of that work to where we actually feel like there's more capacity in our life to love other people and to care for people well. So people do their best learning when they feel safe and a little bit uncomfortable. We create safety by creating clear expectations with people. So I really encourage you, I can't say it enough, this is one of the most valuable things in walking with hurting people, is really make sure that you do the due diligence to help them feel safe, and don't break their safety, because they'll go right back to being like, here's one more person that hurt me. I had an expectation and they broke that expectation. Make sense? Does that, everybody understand what that means? Any questions about that? Okay. Use empathy when listening to people. One of the best things for people who are hurting to know is that someone is listening, that they truly care and are trying to understand where they are coming from. Empathy is the ability to sense the other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else may be thinking or feeling. We read that verse, Jesus empathizes with our weaknesses. that he really does understand. He can, even if he hasn't experienced the exact thing, that Jesus really does empathize, that he has an ability in a sense to sense our emotions and imagine what we might be going through. We want to be able to do that for other people. And when people feel empathy from you, they actually feel really cared for and really loved. And often empathy doesn't mean we're giving them answers. When we're caring for somebody, we're just listening well to people and asking them the right kind of questions. Super important. That's what allows people to really start digging in and diving into some of those painful places, to say, God, I want to invite you into this place now, because, wow, I didn't even realize this is here. But this was painful for me. Jesus, can you heal this? Can you work in this space in my life? Can other people in this community help me heal in this space? And so it's often through our listening and our questions and our empathy that he does that. We're going to do, I'm going to do a little experiment with us right now. I'm going to pass this out around. I want you to grab, there's a little piece of paper here. I want each person to grab one piece of paper. When you get it, I want you to read the question that is on the piece of paper. Think about how you're going to answer it, and then we'll answer these questions to the group. Actually, you guys can just pass it. Don't look at them ahead of time. Just grab one. Start thinking about your question and how you're going to answer it. I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it. Because again, when we want to be empathetic with people, we want to sit with them now, asking great questions is really important. And this may take a little time. We'll just go around, answer the questions as a group. It's a fun way to get to know each other a little bit. No trading questions. All right, the last people got their questions, so I'll give you a second to think about it back there. And then what I'll do is I'll just point at you, and then you can answer the question to the whole group, okay? Is that all right? I'm actually not going to do that. Some of you know why. Questions are really, really important. And so often we actually don't think about the way or the questions that we ask and what they do. So rather than you answering your question, what I would like you to do and to share with the group is, and you can read the question if you want. I don't want you to answer it. But I want you to think about for yourself first, when you read that question and thought about reading it to the group and answering it, how did it make you feel? Would somebody be vulnerable to share just the feeling? And you can even just use the word, but what feelings came out? When you read your question, you thought, I'm going to answer this to the group, how did it make you feel?
When I wrote my question, I was like,
Dang it?
yeah, I was like, I don't want to do this.
You don't want to do this. Okay, so what was the feeling though?
It was just like, maybe a little scared.
Scared.
Be vulnerable.
Scared, all right. Scared is good. Scared is a feeling. Can you read the question for us?
Sure. Why do you react the way you do to things?
Okay.
Why do you react the way?
Why do you react the way you do to things? Okay. Any other feelings? Someone else share a feeling that you felt. Yeah, Ireland.
My question was really basic, but I was
You were scared, again, scared that people were going to judge your answer. Can you read your question for us? How was your week? Okay. So scared that people were going to judge your answer based off of how was your week. Okay? Any other feelings, Cameron?
I felt like I could I had an opportunity to make other people feel a certain way because I got a really vague question, so I could put it in any direction I want.
Okay. Can you read the question for us?
Why are you here?
Why are you here? Okay. You could take it anywhere you want it. So you were kind of like, all right, how can I reshape this to maybe, I'm going to try to figure out what I'm going to do with this question. Okay? What was the feeling? You didn't feel anything? You never feel anything? Okay. Ezra. Well, how'd you feel?
I was kind of annoyed because my initial response was to make my answer artificial.
Okay.
And not really answer how I wanted to.
So the feeling there was he felt annoyed. Annoyed with yourself? Okay, can you read your question for us?
If you could be set free from finances, time, and responsibilities to do anything you wanted next year, what would you do now?
Okay. All right. Any other feelings? Yes.
I was excited.
Yes.
I love this topic, so.
You were excited. So there's another feeling. So we've had scared a couple times. We've had annoyed. We've had maybe a little bit confused or like, I'm going to try to figure out how to do this. We feel excited. What can you tell us more about? Can you read your question for us?
Do you have any pets?
Do you have any pets? Okay, so she felt excited. I'm not going to have you answer it, but that made you excited, which means I guess you probably have pets. All right, great. Thank you. Yes.
I kind of felt disappointed.
Felt disappointed. Okay.
I thought I would get like a more thought-provoking or deep or basic question.
Okay, what was your question?
How have you seen God working in your life in the last year? It's just, I feel like I talk about this so much that it's like,
How have you seen God working in your life in the last year? And you felt disappointed because you were hoping for something that would go a little bit maybe deeper, a little bit different topic. Okay. Yeah.
I'd say I felt anxious and annoyed.
Felt anxious and annoyed. Ooh. Will you read the question for us?
Do you think God has a plan for your life?
Okay. Do you think God has a plan for your life? Made you feel anxious and annoyed. Do you mind if I can ask you to unpack annoyed for me a little bit?
Well, I think I wasn't really annoyed with the question. I think I was annoyed with myself because it was an easy question. But I was anxious about having to speak up and answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was worried about saying the wrong thing. And my instinct thought was and that's not the actual answer. So I was kind of annoyed that I was annoyed with anxiousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Gabe.
My instant feelings was shocked and anxious.
Shocked and anxious. Okay. Can you read your question for us?
Just as, how's it going?
Mm-hmm. And it made you feel shocked and anxious. What made you feel shocked?
It's kind of the question I've been asking myself for the past weeks. It's the one I think out of an entire basket of questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it made you feel shocked and a little bit. You said shocked and annoyed, or shocked and anxious. Okay. Other feelings? Yes. Support.
I kind of got nervous, and then I had my initial answer, and then I had to change it so something I could share with everybody.
Okay. Can you read your question for us?
You have a significant time in your life when you realize you're an adult.
Do you have a significant time in your life when you realize you were an adult? Great. And say the feelings again.
What?
Say the feelings again.
Nervous, and then kind of readjust.
Yep. So nervous, and what was the last one?
Readjust.
Readjusting, yeah. So nervous, but nervous is a good feeling word. Any others? Anybody else want to share? Yes. Yeah. So you're ready to answer, but you didn't want to have to because then you have to talk in front of the group. So then maybe a little bit nervous or anxious. There's the feeling. Okay, can you read us your question? What do you think of the person sitting across from you? Okay, fair enough. All right, one more. There's still a lot of feeling. Yes?
I felt a bit panicked because I didn't know how to answer the question.
Panicked.
Didn't have an answer ready.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know what to do.
What was your question?
It's so stupid, but to get to know a little more about you, can you share with us a character that you can relate to from a movie, book, TV show, or the Bible? What about this character do you connect to?
Okay. So you wanted to answer it right, but that means, oh man, I need more time to think about this. And so you felt a little bit like, okay. Questions that are asked of us evoke feelings, right? So when someone asks you a question, it actually isn't just not like logical, rational, like I need to answer. It actually brings up a feeling inside of us. And what do feelings do? Feelings can make us excited. They can make us anxious. They can make us panicked. They can make us angry, annoyed. I mean, think about all of the different feelings that came out in this room just based off of reading a question and the thought of answering it in front of people, right? So doesn't it feel like it would be important for us to take time to think through how we ask questions well? Because we could ask a question of someone and it could change their entire countenance, right? The way that they're feeling, the way that they're being present in the room. Is there anybody that wanted to run out of the room and not like felt like I just want to get out of here? Gabe? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've literally had people run out of the room. I had someone throw up one time. Because feelings bring out stuff in us. We can't help it. Because of our stories, because of those things. And so it really is important to think through how do we ask good questions of people if we want to love them and care for them well. All right, I want to ask you one more question about your questions. I want you to analyze your question, think about the question, and I want you to tell me, was your question a good question or not? And why or why not was it a good question for this group, in this place? So think about it for a second. Analyze your question. Was your question a good question? Was it an okay question? Was it a lame, like, I didn't like this question? What would you say? Yeah?
I would say it's a good question. It's thought-provoking. It also gives you like a boundary so that you can think there and not go off on a tangent. And so I thought it was.
Can you read your question to us again?
Yeah. How have you seen God working in your life in the last year?
Okay, so how have you seen God working in your life in the last year? Now, that is a very good question, decent question, for a group like this. Context is extremely important. So it might be a great question in this context because you guys are at Bible college. So there's an assumption in the question, right, that you believe in God. How many times is that question asked in churches and in public places where people aren't even believers? It's actually asked a lot. Oh yeah. You go to a small group for a church, you go to things like that, and even a youth group where some of the kids they don't even know about Jesus, and people are like, how's God been working in your life in the last year? Think about how terrifying that would be to go, I don't even know if I believe in God, and we're going around the circle, and I'm supposed to talk about how God's doing, what he's done in my life. I don't know what to say. All these other people are strong Christians, and they're going to have really great answers, and I'm not going to have them because I don't believe in God. I don't know who God is. I'm still trying to figure that out. So context is really important, right, when we ask a question. This happens a lot in churches where people don't think about the questions they're asking, and they ask a question, all of a sudden they ostracize someone because of where they're at. So thinking through the context that we're in is very, very, very important, okay? There's some other questions that were out there that context makes a huge difference. Anyone else got a question? Analyze your question. Anybody else have a thought about their question? Yes?
I think this is a good question because it makes you reflect, especially at like where we all are in life. Like we're all kind of becoming adults and trying to figure out what that means and how to be an adult. So I think it's like a really good question because it makes us reflect and like that's the way our life is heading right now. We're all trying to figure out how to be an adult.
Yep. Can you read your question for us again?
Do you have a significant time in your life when you realize you were an adult?
Yes. It can be a very good question. I would say in most contexts, I would actually be really cautious about that question. Because for some people, that's not a hard question to answer. They're like, oh, it's when I got my first job and I had responsibility and like you can, but some people, the time that they realized they were adult was something that bad happened to them. It's the first time that I saw that a man or a woman looked at me differently than just a kid or somebody like, and even maybe there was trauma involved. So that can be when we talked about things that can trigger things. We want to be careful with how we ask questions because for some people, that is a terrifying question. Woman that threw up, that question. So depending on the context again, and where you're, a great question for maybe a counselor or a mentor or a pastor who's you're really close with and they feel safe, that might be a great question. If it's front loaded okay, then that could be an okay question, but we have to, again, thinking through and being careful with the questions we ask and what that might mean for somebody else. Okay, another question, analyze your question. Yeah, Gabe, go ahead.
I would say could be a good question, but also could be loaded at times.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very open-ended thing, and a lot of people's instant responses are just want to say, I'm good, or everything's going fine, but in reality, it could be either going fine for them, or it could be the worst time in their life, and they just want to
Yep.
want to dump it on everybody else.
So what was your question again?
How's it going?
How's it going? How many times do you hear people say, how's it going? What's up? Does that really go deep in relationship? Do you get to really know something pointed or intentional about somebody if you ask that question? Not usually. It can be a good casual conversation. That's the question I'll ask somebody if I'm standing in line at Safeway with them. How's it going? We're standing here, we might as well talk. Because they can choose where they want to go with it, and they can be vulnerable. But if I was in an intentional community or trying to walk with somebody, that would be a pretty generic question that would feel like you don't really want to know me, do you? It's low-hanging fruit. I'm not saying it's a bad question. It's an okay question. How, it uses the how word, so it does keep it open-ended. They can answer it however they want. But it's okay. Yeah, Gabe.
I would like to expand a little bit more. This question itself psychologically is kind of fascinating because it's pretty used as a conversation opener, and most of the time people aren't looking for an actual honest response. They're always looking for either an okay or how's it going
Yeah.
if they don't know you.
Yeah.
When you can tell the sincerity in their voice.
That's great.
Then that's when they want you to feel.
I love that. It's probably a good lead-in question. Like it's safe, how's it going? But listening to them well and then being able to tee off of something that they're interested in, that they want to talk about, then you maybe can ask a more pointed question that helps go deeper. All right, let's do a few more. Yes?
I would say it's not really a good question because it's just a yes or no answer.
Yes.
I feel like it could, if you do worded it, it could be a very good question.
Mm-hmm.
It could lead to a good conversation. But I think it's just one of those questions where something like yeah or no and just like.
What was the question again?
Do you think God has a plan for your life?
I love your analyst, or the way you analyze that question. Do you read it out loud one more time?
Do you think God has a plan for your life?
Do you think God has a plan for your life? This is somebody that has not really done their work to think through how do I ask good questions. That kind of stuff happens all the time in Christianese, church ministry, or wherever, and not just in the church, but it's often a yes or no question. And if you're really trying to get to know, what will they say? Yes. Moving on. And then what usually happens if somebody that has asked that question and they think they've done a good job preparing for it, they go, well, yeah, okay. And the person goes, that's not what you asked me. Like, now you're shaming me for not answering a question that you didn't ask me. Like, you asked me, do I believe God's working in my life? And I said yes, and that wasn't good enough for you, but you didn't ask anything more than that. So you're trying to get me to go somewhere that you didn't help guide me. So thinking through how we ask questions that are open-ended, not close-ended, is really important. Yes or no questions are usually not good at getting to know people. And it makes us they either have to make the leap themselves and go yes, and talk about it, and they have to just kind of go, I hope that they're asking for more than just a yes or no question, or it's an out. And they can say yes or no, and then when someone says, well, can you, come on. And you're like, well, that's not what you asked. That's really frustrating, and then it turns into anger. So another different feeling comes out because of the response. Can you read your question again? Because you were excited.
Do you have any pets?
Do you have any pets? Can you answer that question that was asked?
Yes.
Thank you. Takes the excitement away, right? Because you're like, I didn't even get to talk about my little dog or puppy or what's the name of the pet that you love? Prince. She didn't get to tell us about Prince. So she was excited, but she would have jumped past the question because she wanted to tell us about Prince, right? But that's not what the question asked. It was closed-ended. And so we really need to think through about that when we're working with people and we really want to get to know them. How do we ask intentional questions that are actually drawing them out? This is really important when you're working in youth ministry. Thinking through how we're talking with our junior hires, how we're talking with high schoolers, asking questions that are going to pull them out, because so often we can be anxious and then we ask something that's like that. We don't think through, like, I just asked them a close-ended question and they're either going to leap to it, but half the time what do we get from our junior hires? Good. It's okay. Yes. I like it. Because we didn't ask a great question and actually was pointed towards something that's going to help us get to know them. Okay, let's do 2 more. We could spend a lot of time doing this, but maybe, yes?
I'm personally never liked this question.
You personally don't like it?
No. It's,
What is one thing that you are proud of? What do you not like about it?
I feel like it can be prideful.
It can be prideful? Oh man, I would love to sit and have a conversation with you about that more. Not because of anything specific, but I think that, and this is more just, that's helpful for me just to even go, man, now I have all sorts of questions for you to talk through that. Because, is it bad for us to be proud of something in our life? So recognizing, okay, how do we have conversations around that? Like, what is that? Like, if you say something that you're proud of, how does it evoke that? Again, that was a close-ended question too, I think, wasn't it? Say it. Can you read it again?
What is one thing about you that you're proud of?
What is one thing about you that you're proud of? Okay. So I actually love that question because it's kind of low-hanging fruit, but it forces someone to have to kind of go, okay, like for me, and I'm not going to assume anything because I don't know why you didn't like it, but for a lot of people, if they can't answer it, then I go, okay, we've got some work to do. I want to help them understand that they actually have some amazing things in their life that they should be proud of. And I want to help them identify some of those things so that they can be proud of something about themselves. Because a lot of people don't know how to answer because they don't feel proud about anything in their life. Or they're afraid of answering because they're like, I'm afraid I'm going to be bragging. Depending on where they're at, so I would want to expound and talk a little more about what that means. But then, if we do that, then I get to know Nolan better. Like if we're having that conversation, I'm trying to draw him out. So if I was working with him, that would help me. And I'd go, okay, yeah, let's talk about that, man. Or maybe he tells me something that he is proud of and I want to hear more about it. And then he is talking about something that he likes about himself that he's proud of. And actually he walks away from that engagement and that conversation with me going, man, that Ben really cared about me. Like that guy cared about spending time with me and talking about something about me. Okay, does that make sense? I wish we could spend a lot more time analyzing all these questions because it's such a fun thing to think about. And I have spent so many hours. I mean, my job is about asking people questions because I'm a coach and I do a lot of counseling. And so I'm asking people questions all the time. But making sure that we're listening well and we ask good questions is crucial. I'm going to pass out. Again, I wish we had more time. I'm going to pass these around, but this is just some tips on asking open and honest questions and how we can form questions that actually, this maybe can help you think more creatively about how we ask questions of people. So pass these around. But we're going to have to keep moving because of time. We can talk more about this later if you want to. If you want to talk about your question, and I would love to talk more about it. I wish we could really dive into it a little bit more, but we don't have time. All right. So, thinking about the questions you're asking and how they will be perceived. Avoid questions that can be answered with one word, like yes or no. How and what questions generally draw a more thoughtful response and are open-ended. We didn't talk about this one, but for those of you that had why questions, so just look at your question again. For those of you that had a why question, did anybody have any weird feelings about the why question? Yes, what was it? Like,
Well, it was why are you here? And I was like, oh, I could make it. Like I could make everyone really sad and say a really sad answer, or I could make everyone laugh and say a really.
yep, good.
Oh, I was gonna say.
Oh, you were answering for his?
No, I was gonna
Correct. Stay right there, and we're gonna bookmark it because I want to come back to that. Colin, can you read your question again?
Yeah. Why do you react the way you do to things?
Why questions tend to make us defensive. So when someone gets asked a question that starts with why, it can automatically, we kind of can get on the defensive, right? Why do you think that way? Why did you answer that way? Why are you here? All of those kind of things can make us defensive, and then all of a sudden we feel those feelings coming up of going like, I'm really annoyed, and I feel like I have to defend myself now. You know, an example when you're doing a Bible study with a youth group, and you're talking with junior hires and high schoolers, or you're walking through, we can often, we do it in life all the time, but we ask why questions. Someone answers, you know, someone throws out a question about a verse in the Bible that you're studying, and it's like, oh, why did you answer it that way? And they're going, I must have answered it wrong. Did I answer it wrong? I don't know. Like, they don't know how to, so rather than saying like, oh, well, yeah, that was really a fascinating answer. Like, what helped you come up to that conclusion? It feels different when someone answers with a what or a how, because they don't, it gives them opportunity, and it doesn't feel like there's a right or wrong answer, and whether you got it right or wrong or not, you have to try to guess and read the other person's emotions to see, like, did they like my answer? Did they not like my answer? So why questions are usually often create defensive posture in the person that you're talking to. So again, think about the questions that you're asking each other in community. Think about the questions you're asking people that you're working with when we're walking with our neighbor, because they can do amazing things to develop community and relationships, but they can also push people away, and they can even hurt people. Okay. Next one, lean into the gospel. So important when we want to walk with people in community to lean in the gospel. We have to acknowledge that it's truly God's work that can transform us and those in our community, and we're participants in what Christ is doing in their lives, right? So we're just participating. I believe that we get the opportunity, as he's invited us into this relationship, Father, Son, and Spirit, that we get to participate in the work that God is doing in people's lives. And so we have to lean into the gospel. We have to lean in the truth of the good news. And it can't just be news, it needs to be good. It needs to be good. They need to experience the goodness of God, not just news. My son and I have this thing that I talk with him about when trying to help him make friends. We call it the boomerang tool. And I always tell him, it's like a boomerang. I'm like, buddy, if you want people to want to get to know you and build relationship, and this is so helpful for everyone in life, but seek to be interested before you're interesting, right? So often we flip that. We want to be interesting to people, thinking that's going to draw a relationship. People typically don't want to draw close to you if you just want to talk about things. Talk about yourself. Seek to be interested before you're interesting. The reason it's a boomerang, because if you're really interested in someone, what happens? It comes back. Have you ever sat with someone who asks you great questions? You're more fascinated and want to ask more questions to them about themselves because they care so much about you. And so that's how you develop deep relationships with people. Seek to be interested before you're interesting. Super helpful. Sometimes when we talk about the gospel, evangelism, often we just go talk at people. Do you know Jesus? I want to tell you about Jesus. Da, 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 da. And they're going, okay, but you don't know anything about me. Like, I think sometimes the best way to do evangelism, I did evangelism ministry for years. And half the time it was just asking people about, you know, I heard you listen to this song in your car. Like, man, what about that band? Sounds really good. What do you like about that band? And I would find ways to connect to things that matter to them. And then eventually they would want to know more about me. And then we start talking about what I do. And all of a sudden we're in a conversation that's relational. And I get to introduce the idea of Jesus, or, yeah, I'm a Christ follower. And, you know, you wouldn't imagine the times that I'd have conversations with people and they find out I'm a pastor. And sometimes that just is a conversation killer. But sometimes people are really interested. Like, you're a pastor? Like, really? You know, you seem kind of like you don't really seem like a pastor type of guy. It's like, yeah, you know, and then we get an opportunity to have a conversation about it. It's awesome. I love it. So we got to lean into the gospel. Remember that the triune God created us in his image to be relational. And therefore, most healing and growth happens through connection and relationship. So growth happens through that connection with people and relationship. God made us relational. We're made in the image of God. We want to bear his image that way. Christ truly understands what we're going through. We spent a whole hour talking about this. Hebrews 4:14 through 16. We have a high priest who's gone through the heavens. Therefore, Jesus, the high priest, can sympathize with our weaknesses, tempted in every way that we are, yet did not sin. Therefore, we can approach the throne of grace with confidence that he can help us and give mercy in our time of need. Christ truly understands what we're going through, and so we can lean into the gospel that way when we're working with people and walking with people that are hurting, because we know that he truly understands them, and so we're not introducing them to somebody that doesn't really know the pain that they're going through and what's going on. He's in control and sees much more than we do for ourselves and for others. And it took me a while in my life to believe this, but Jesus knows more that's going on in my life than I even realize, and he knows what's going on in other people's lives more than often they realize or I realize. So he's in control and he sees more than we do. Therefore, we're going to get into prayer in a minute, but just trying to listen to him and what he speaks to us around that. All right, prayer. Sometimes all we have to offer people is prayer. And actually, that can be tremendously powerful in a person's life. The amount of times that people would do drop-ins at the church because they wanted to talk to somebody and they would want money. I would deal with a lot of homeless. They had an agenda, and I'd be like, you know what? I can't give you money. I don't have it to give you, but can I pray for you? Sometimes they'd be like, I don't care. Don't really. Sometimes I would pray for people, and they just start weeping. Like, prayer can be tremendously powerful in people's lives. Praying for them is important. Don't be afraid to pray for healing in someone's life and that God would take away his or her pain. Pray with anticipation. And I say this because I always struggled with this. I always was nervous about praying that somebody would get healing because I personally didn't believe God was going to heal them. And so I would be nervous and that God wasn't going to heal them, and then they would be disappointed and they would reject God. And I just didn't realize, I want to pray with anticipation and believe that God can heal somebody. It may not happen, but I'm going to pray, at least the way that I'm praying is that I want to pray for anticipation. Pray with anticipation. Also, don't be afraid to pray that if the pain doesn't go away, that God would not waste it, but use it to work in their life and draw them closer to him. That he would give them the strength to endure whatever is ahead, and that he is there with them. Okay, so just stepping into that and saying, hey, I'm going to pray. I want to pray for you now. I'm going to pray for healing and that God heals you. And I'm also going to pray that if he doesn't, that God will walk with you in your pain and that he will show you how he's going to use that because he's with you the whole time. And whatever's ahead, I'm going to pray that you have the strength to endure that. Okay? Create a regular rhythm to pray for people in your community or those you are trying to help. Sometimes just asking the Spirit to reveal to you what they need prayer for can be a great starting point. So creating a rhythm in your praying for people in your community, the people that you're working with, and praying and asking, God, I do this all the time. Jesus, I don't know what's going on with this person. Holy Spirit, can you maybe help me identify. Maybe I hear something when I'm listening to them share that it comes out, and I know what really, a question that I can ask them that really gets to their pain, that maybe you can come in and heal that place. So create a regular rhythm of prayer. If you're going to tell someone that you're going to pray for them, mean it. How often do we say, hey, I'm going to pray for you, bro. I'm going to pray for this. I'll pray for you. And then we forget. I've done that so many times as a pastor where they tell me their story. And I'm like, hey, I will be praying for you. And then I forget about it. And I don't pray for them. And that God has convicted me that if I tell somebody that I'm going to pray for them, that I really mean it. It's just crucially important to do that we want to be integral for people, and it's just Christianese if we just say, oh, I'll be praying for you, and we don't actually mean it, and we don't actually do it. Super important. Brian and I were talking the other day. Brian had an interview, and I'm like, bro, I'm going to go upstairs and pray for you. I got upstairs, and I prayed for Brian, because I don't want to tell him I'm going to pray for him if I'm not actually going to pray for that situation and the interview that he was going to have. We want to be intentional, actually pray for people, okay? I'm going to read this. Oh, man, do I have time to do this? I don't. All right, I won't read that part. Scripture. As followers of Christ, the thing that can anchor us to the truth is our ultimate guide is Scripture. Even when other people do not see us as authoritative, we as the church believe it is essential in helping us understand how we are to live as disciples. Scripture can be our guide. There's so many things in the Bible. If we really pay attention to it, what it's actually saying and really dive in, it can guide us. You don't need to be a theologian or a Bible scholar, but you do need to know how to point people in the right direction when looking at what the Bible has to say. This is why you guys are here. So you're here to learn about the Bible. You're here to learn different things that you'll walk away from this and you'll remember some classes you may not remember at all, but hopefully you'll walk away with some understanding of how do I find out what God's word has to say about things. There's some basic methods that can help you in preparing to study a passage with an individual group. I help people with what's called the REAP method. Read it, examine it, apply it, and then let's pray about it. You guys understand a lot of that stuff. We believe that God's word is living and active and that the Spirit can reveal things in us that we don't even see when we approach the Bible and open it that we want to be listening to what God's saying to us in that. For the word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword and piercing as far as the division of soul and spirit, of both joints and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of our heart. So as we come to Scripture, sometimes my prayer is like, God, I'm going to be faithful and read this passage. I just ask that you would teach me something, reveal something to me in this, that you can illuminate something in my life or in somebody else's life that's going to help me grow and help me care. It's okay to say that I don't know when questions come up that you don't have the answer to. I would encourage you to not leave them where they are, though, but help the individual or group discover ways that they can study it deeper. This is one that I struggled with for years as a pastor, because sometimes I was like, I'm not a theologian, and people would ask me really heavy theological questions, and I would feel anxious because they want to know the answer because they think I'm a pastor, I should know everything about the Bible, and I don't. And sometimes it would just say, you know what, I don't know. Like, I'm going to have to look into that. I'm going to have to study that further. Learn to be able to say, it's okay to say, like, yeah, that's a great question. I actually don't know. Like, can I do some research and come back? Or can I think about this? Sometimes people say, how do I do this thing? How do I heal from this? It's okay to say, like, yeah, I don't have an answer for you right now, but would it be okay with you if I kind of try to find the answer and then we can reconnect and I can share that with you? So follow up with people. That's really important. Lean into Scripture. That's why God has given it to us. All right. We're done with this week in my teaching, but I really hope that through this time that we really have leaned into the greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. It's mine. This is the first and the greatest commandment. We need to learn to love God, and we need to understand that we are made in his image and that he loves us so deeply. And it was the outpouring of his love that actually drew us to him. That's why he created us. He wants us to love him, and he cares more about our love than our obedience. I think he calls us to obedience, but so often we avoid him because we haven't been obedient, and we push him away. And he's like, I want you to, I'm like a father. You're my child. I know you've done wrong. Please come. Don't be shamed. I love you. This is the first and the greatest commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. And I hope that this has been helpful for you this week to talk through some of this stuff. There's so much more that we could talk about. I had so many more things that I wanted to get into, and I didn't, but that's okay. Because life is a journey. We're all on a journey together. I hope that the journey doesn't end here as far as how to walk with people well and how to walk with the wounded. For some of you, you may go into occupations where that's what you're going to do. You're going to go help hurting people, and I hope you do. But regardless of whether it's your occupation or not, remember, Jesus, it's a commandment. Go and love your neighbor. Go and do likewise. That's what he said. After the Pharisee, the teacher of the law, the lawyer asked him, hey, Jesus, what does it mean to love your neighbor? He said, go and do likewise. And I encourage you, love each other well in this community. You guys have an amazing group. You have a couple more months before school's over, and you're going to be thinking through a lot of things, but care for each other well. Love each other well in this process because it's a special time. You will look back. I look back at my time at Cape and Ray all the time and go, man, Lord, I wish I could go back and live that whole year over again. It was one of the best years of my life. Sometimes I say that by accident. My wife's like, well, what about the year we got married? And I'm like, oh, I mean, second to that. Really important. Finally, thank you. Just thank you for loving on me, loving on my family. Adric and Brinley, they've been just talking about all of you, like things that they see in our room, and they just felt really cared for. Daisha and I have really enjoyed being here with you. We're here till Sunday, so I'm not saying goodbye. But this is my email address, ben@bencoaching.com. So I would love to stay in contact if you want to. Maybe you have more questions or something I said stands out to you. Please don't hesitate to email me and reach out. I would love to have further conversations, or if there's something that we went through that you're going, oh, can you send me the printout of that? I lost it, or anything like that. I can email it to you. Not a problem. But I would love to stay in touch. If you're ever in Portland, Oregon, Please don't hesitate to let me know you're coming. I'd love for you to come over. We have dinner, and I can show you around the city if you want. If you're ever wanting to go fishing in Alaska, not sports fishing, not a great sports fisherman, but if you want to come and work really hard on a boat, feel free to reach out, and sometimes we're looking for crew. But I just thank you for just caring and listening so well. I hope that it was helpful for you this week and that you learned a lot. And we'll look forward. Please, I'm not gone, so we can talk. If you want to meet before I leave, I would love to connect with you. Can I just pray as we're done? Can we just stand as I pray? Lord Jesus, Father, Son, and Spirit, I thank you so much for this chance to be together. I thank you for Anchor House and that it creates this community and this space that often is messy, but that we get to stay at the table with you. Thank you for staying at the table with us, Jesus, that you constantly are willing to sit with us, even though it's probably very frustrating at times. But thank you because it's a place where we can find healing and we can find life, the life that you offer us. And I pray that you would extend that life to others as we go to try to love people that you put in our midst. We love you deeply. In your name, amen. Next week, a guy, Frank Cerrone's here, which I just found out he's coming in tonight. And he was my mentor growing up, so I'm very excited I'm going to get to see him and his wife,